She does this every single time she doesn't get what she wants." Sylvia's voice rang through the courtroom so clearly that the court reporter actually looked up from her keyboard. My mother-in-law was on her feet in the gallery, one finger pointed directly at me like I was standing trial for something. "Your Honor, she is performing." My husband Warren didn't object. He leaned back in his chair and smiled, just slightly, just enough that I could see it from across the aisle, and nodded once, like a man watching a plan fall into place. I opened my mouth to respond. Nothing came, the room tilted. A pressure I'd been trying to ignore for the past 20 minutes suddenly expanded across my sternum and shot straight up into my jaw. My hand found the edge of the witness stand. The wood was cold, weirdly cold. "Ma'am, are you?" the bailiff started. I didn't hear the rest. The floor rushed up to meet me. Someone screamed my name. Another voice shouted, and then a woman pushed through from the third row of the gallery. Quick, deliberate, no hesitation, and dropped to one knee beside me before I'd fully stopped moving. "I'm a physician." Her voice was calm in a way that cut through the chaos. "I need everyone to step back." She pressed 2 fingers to the side of my neck, then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small pulse oximeter, the kind doctors carry when they know they might need it anywhere. She clipped it to my finger. She looked at the reading. She looked at it again. Then she looked up at the bench with an expression I will never forget. "Your Honor, this woman is not faking anything. Call 911 now." The judge stood so fast her chair rolled back and hit the wall. Nobody moved for one breathless second. Nobody. Not Warren. Not Sylvia. Not a single person in that courtroom. Then everything erupted at once. 3 months before that moment, I still believed my marriage was worth saving. I was wrong. But I didn't know it yet. My name is Lydia Bowman. I'm 52 years old, a retired lieutenant commander from the United States Coast Guard. I spent 24 years coordinating search and rescue logistics off the Atlantic coast. Not the rescue swimmer jumping from the helicopter, not the diver going into the water, but the person on the other end of the radio making sure that everyone who went in came back out. The one tracking weather windows and fuel loads and hospital availability at 3 in the morning. The one who knew that 30 seconds of wrong information could be the difference between a survivor and a body. That work teaches you a specific kind of discipline. You don't panic, you don't assume. You verify everything, twice, before you commit to a course of action. I just never imagined I'd need that skill set in my own living room. Warren and I met at a Coast Guard charity dinner in Norfolk, Virginia, when I was 31, and he was building a career as a civil litigation attorney. He was charming in a careful, understated way, thoughtful, funny when he loosened up, someone who actually listened when you talked. We married after 2 years. We didn't have children. Life moved in other directions, and eventually we made peace with that, filling the house with 2 rescue dogs and a circle of friends who'd become something closer than family. For 18 years we were genuinely good together, not perfect, but good. Then I retired. Warren kept practicing law for another 1.5 years after I left the service. During that time, his mother Sylvia, who lived 40 minutes away in Chesapeake, became a daily presence in our home. She'd never been warm during the years I was active duty. She used to refer to my career as Lydia's Coast Guard situation, as though I were pursuing a long and inconvenient hobby. But after my retirement, the gap between polite and cruel closed fast. She hadn't expected me to stay busy, I think. She'd imagined I would finally be available, to her version of what a daughter-in-law should be. Instead, I joined a Veterans Transition Advisory Board, took consulting contracts with regional emergency management agencies, and kept moving the way I'd always moved. Sylvia would arrive at our kitchen, before I was dressed, and look at me like I was the visitor. Then the documents started appearing. Warren brought home the first set on a Tuesday evening in February. He spread several folders across the kitchen island and explained, in the patient tone he used for clients who didn't understand their own legal matters, that our financial advisor had recommended we restructure our retirement portfolio. All I needed to do was sign. I looked at the papers, LLC transfer documents, a property reclassification form, references to a holding company called Belmont Heritage LLC that I had never once heard mentioned in our 20 years of marriage. What is Belmont Heritage? He exhaled slowly. A holding structure for tax efficiency. I've never seen this account. I set it up last quarter. I set it up, not we, not together. I'd like to read everything before I sign anything, I said. Warren's jaw tightened in the way it did when he thought he was being patient with someone who was making things unnecessarily complicated. You've been out of the workforce 2 years. Let me handle the financial side. I had spent 2 decades managing logistics budgets that ran into 8 figures, coordinating multi-agency disaster response operations across 4 states. But sure. I didn't sign. 3 days later, Sylvia arrived before I'd reached the bottom of the stairs. She and Warren were already talking in low voices in the kitchen that went quiet when I walked in. Warren tells me you're making this process difficult, she said, smiling the smile she reserved for statements with edges. I asked questions about legal documents before signing them. That's exactly the problem. She folded her hands on the counter. You've spent so long giving orders that you've forgotten what it means to be a partner. Warren said nothing. That was the moment I understood something had shifted permanently. Not what Sylvia said, what Warren chose not to. Around that same time, my body started behaving in ways I couldn't rationalize away. It began with my heart rate. I'd stand up from the couch and suddenly feel it hammering, fast, erratic, like something running when it should be resting. I'd get dizzy climbing a single flight of stairs. Some mornings I woke up exhausted despite 8 hours of sleep, as though my body had been working through the night instead of recovering. My vision would gray out for a few seconds when I changed positions too quickly. I started sitting down in grocery stores because my legs had stopped being reliable. I mentioned it to Warren once. He glanced up briefly from his laptop. You're probably dehydrated. I mentioned it to Sylvia by accident. She overheard me tell Warren my heart had been racing again while I was washing dishes. She waved one hand. Anxiety. You've never dealt well with stillness. Give it time. My best friend Rita Carver. We'd met during my second posting when she worked as a civilian contractor embedded with our logistics team, and she'd known me long enough to notice things I didn't say out loud. Showed up at my door one afternoon with takeout and looked at my face for about 3 seconds. When did you last sleep through the night? Rita, I'm fine. You look like you've had a fever for 2 weeks. I don't have a fever. She sat down and didn't move until I promised to call my doctor. I finally made the appointment. My primary care physician ordered blood work and an ECG. The ECG flagged something abnormal. She referred me to a cardiologist. The cardiologist ordered a tilt table test. They tilt you from horizontal to standing while monitoring your heart rate and blood pressure, and then they watch what happens. What happened in my case was that my heart rate shot up over 40 beats per minute within the first 3 minutes. The result came back consistent with postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, POTS, a form of dysautonomia in which the nervous system fails to properly regulate circulation when you move from lying or sitting to standing. It wasn't a death sentence, but it was real, it was documented, and it was significantly aggravated by stress. I came home and told Warren. He was finishing a phone call. He held up one finger. When he hung up, I explained the diagnosis, the condition, the mechanism, the treatment protocol my cardiologist had outlined. He was quiet for a moment. Then, POTS is also commonly associated with anxiety presentations in women. I stared at him. I'm not dismissing you, he said carefully, the way he spoke when he was framing something for a jury. I'm saying that stress can produce symptoms that mimic a lot of conditions, especially during a difficult period. 4 days later, I found out he had filed for divorce. Not from Warren, from a certified letter that arrived while he was in court, addressed to both of us, that the mail carrier handed me directly. The filing date was stamped 11 days earlier. 11 days he'd known. 11 days of sitting across from me at dinner, listening to me describe the cardiologist appointments, and the test results, and the new medication, saying nothing. I called Rita from the front steps. She arrived in 35 minutes. She didn't say I told you so. She sat next to me while I stared at the letter and tried to remember how to breathe. There's something else going on, she said after a long while. I looked at her. The property reclassification document. She turned to face me. Which property, Lydia? It took me a moment to follow where she was going. My father had left me a commercial warehouse property in Richmond when he passed. A small but functional building he'd owned for 30 years. Appraised at just over $400,000, it had been in my name alone before the marriage. In Virginia, inherited assets remain separate property in a divorce unless they've been commingled with marital assets. Unless someone reclassified them on paper. Unless someone got a signature. I called an attorney the next morning. Her name was Paula Reese, a former JAG officer who now ran a family law practice in Virginia Beach. She listened to everything without interrupting. Then she asked to see every document Warren had placed in front of me over the past 18 months. She went very still after reading through them. "Lydia," she said eventually, "did you sign anything during this period without fully reviewing it first?" There had been one form, Warren had called it a beneficiary update, that he'd handed me on an evening when I'd just returned from a cardiology appointment and could barely hold my eyes open. I'd glanced at it. It referenced our existing accounts. I signed it. Paula turned the page toward me. The header didn't say beneficiary update, it said property transfer authorization. My signature was at the bottom, and the Richmond warehouse had already been transferred, on paper, into Belmont Heritage LLC. I studied my signature, then I studied it again. "That's not right," I said. "What do you mean?" "The way I write my L, I loop it. Always, it's muscle memory from 24 years of signing official documents. That one doesn't loop." I pointed to the letter. Someone copied my handwriting, but they didn't know about the loop. Paula set the document flat on her desk and reached for her phone. "I'm going to need a forensic document examiner." The weeks that followed were methodical and grinding. Paula filed motions. Warren's attorney filed objections. Every subpoena for financial records was delayed. Warren knew exactly how courts operated, which meant he knew exactly how to slow things down while appearing to cooperate. Meanwhile, my symptoms worsened. Stress, my cardiologist had warned me, was the accelerant, not the cause, the fuel. Then Paula called with news I hadn't expected. "Do you know a Dr. Adrian Cole?" The name was familiar. Dr. Cole was a neurologist at the Veterans Specialty Clinic in Norfolk. She'd published peer-reviewed research on dysautonomia in female veterans, and my cardiologist had mentioned her as one of the leading specialists on the East Coast. "She's reviewed your medical records," Paula said. "She's willing to appear at the hearing." I didn't understand. She doesn't know me. She said she makes a point of knowing cases like yours. A pause. Her exact words were, "Invisible conditions have visible consequences in courtrooms. She's watched too many veterans with POTS get dismissed during legal proceedings." I didn't know how to respond to that then. I still don't, really. The morning of the hearing, I put on the navy blazer I'd worn to my Coast Guard retirement ceremony. Not to impress the court, just to remind myself who I still was when things got hard. Warren was already seated when I arrived. He didn't look at me. Sylvia was in the front row behind him, posture precise, expression composed, the picture of a woman who had already decided how the day would end. Dr. Adrian Cole sat 3 rows back. She nodded when I caught her eye. She had a small medical bag on the seat beside her. Judge Marion Holloway called the proceedings to order. Warren's attorney called Sylvia first. She walked to the stand like a woman who had been waiting for this specific moment for years. Soft voice, careful pauses. She described in warm and sorrowful tones a daughter-in-law who had never quite been able to leave behind the habit of control, who manufactured crises when she felt cornered, who had, on multiple occasions, developed sudden physical complaints at convenient moments. "In your observation," Warren's attorney asked, "has Lydia exaggerated her physical condition?" Sylvia sighed. "It pains me to say this, but yes. Whenever things became difficult between them, there was always something. An episode wrong." She lowered her gaze. "I love Lydia, that's why this is so hard to say." Paula's cross-examination was efficient. She caught Sylvia in 3 quiet contradictions. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that exploded. Just enough that someone paying attention would notice the seams. Warren testified next. He was composed, careful, and very good at implying things without saying them directly. He spoke about a wife who had grown suspicious after retirement, who questioned everything, whose health concerns had a pattern of appearing during conflict. He didn't call me a liar. He didn't need to. The impression was already in the room. Then I was called to the stand. Warren's attorney established, gently and efficiently, that I had no final diagnosis documented in the court record. He established that I had requested continuances for medical reasons. He established through careful phrasing, through timed pauses, that my symptoms had a habit of arriving when they were most advantageous to my legal position. Is it fair to say, Mrs. Bowman, that stress tends to trigger your episodes? Stress worsens an underlying neurological condition, yes. So the episodes are stress-related. The condition is autonomic, the stress. Thank you, no further questions. The implication settled over the courtroom like weather. Judge Holloway made a note. She looked at me, not unkindly, but not entirely persuaded either. Then Sylvia stood up. She didn't wait to be addressed. She stood in the gallery and pointed her finger across the room and said, in a voice that found every corner, "She staged this. She's been staging everything for months, Your Honor. She does this every single time she doesn't get what she wants." Warren made a small sound, not quite a laugh, not agreement exactly, just enough. The room held its breath. I opened my mouth. And my nervous system, which had been managing the stress of that room for 2 hours, stopped managing it. The tachycardia came without warning, my heart suddenly pounding at what felt like 150 beats per minute while I sat completely still. My blood pressure dropped. The room went gray at the edges, then gray everywhere. My hands lost their grip on the arms of the chair. My legs stopped working. I heard someone say my name. The floor was coming up very fast. Dr. Adrienne Cole was moving before I had finished falling. She covered the distance from the third row to the witness stand in seconds, cleared the railing, and was kneeling on the hardwood beside me before the bailiff had taken 2 steps forward. I'm a physician. Her voice left no space for debate. She clipped the pulse oximeter to my finger. She found my pulse with 2 fingers and counted. Then she produced a compact blood pressure cuff from her bag, and it beeped almost immediately. She looked at the readings. Then she looked directly at Judge Holloway. Your Honor. Her heart rate is 164 beats per minute. Her blood pressure has dropped 30 points in under a minute. I am a board-certified neurologist specializing in dysautonomia, and what I am observing is fully consistent with her documented diagnosis. She held up the monitor so the numbers were visible to the bench. This is not a performance, this is a medical event. I have the data in my hands right now. Nobody moved. The entire courtroom, Sylvia, Warren, both attorneys, the bailiff, every observer in every row, was completely silent. Then Judge Holloway said very quietly, "Bailiff, call 911. And the room came apart at the seams. I spent 3 days at Centara Norfolk General. Most of it exists in fragments, ceiling tiles, the rhythm of monitors, Rita's voice telling nurses she wasn't leaving regardless of visiting hours. Dr. Cole stopped in twice. Not as my attending physician, just as someone who wanted to make sure I was clear on what had happened and why. POTS in female veterans is consistently underdiagnosed, she told me on the second morning. And when there's a legal proceeding involved where someone has a reason to want it dismissed, it almost always gets dismissed. I've watched it happen too many times. You stayed in that courtroom on purpose, I said. She didn't answer that directly. She just said, "Your cardiologist sent me your records 2 weeks ago. I knew what I was looking at." A week after discharge, Paula called me into her office. The forensic document examiner had delivered her report. The signature on the property transfer authorization was confirmed as a forgery. The loop on my L, consistent across 30 years of signed military documents, was absent. The signature had been constructed, not written. Additionally, when the court ordered full financial disclosure, 3 additional accounts surfaced under Belmont Heritage LLC, accounts that had been receiving transfers from our joint retirement savings over the preceding 14 months. Total amount moved without my knowledge or consent, $270,000. Warren's attorney requested a continuance. Judge Holloway denied it. The following month, the case was referred to the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office for criminal review. An investigator from the Financial Crimes Unit contacted me 2 weeks later. I gave them everything, every document, every date, every discrepancy I'd documented. I was told the process would not be fast. I was also told there was more than enough to proceed. Sylvia called once, from a number I didn't recognize. I listened to the voicemail. She said she may have been given incomplete information about certain things. She did not say she was sorry for standing up in a courtroom and calling me a fraud while I was having a cardiac episode. I didn't call back. Warren emailed 6 weeks after the final hearing. It was short and it didn't make excuses. He said he had let fear make decisions that cowardice then covered up. He said he should have believed me when I told him something was wrong with my health. He said he was sorry. I read it twice. Then I put my phone down and went out to sit on my back deck and watch the water. I didn't respond that day. Eventually, I wrote back 2 sentences. I forgive you. That doesn't mean I want to see you again. I meant both. The Richmond warehouse was restored to my name in the final settlement. I sold the house Warren and I had shared. Too many good memories alongside the bad ones. And I needed to stop sorting through them every morning before coffee. I moved into a small townhouse near the inlet, with a back deck and a garden bed I've been slowly learning to maintain, and a quietness that took some getting used to. My cardiologist has me on a management protocol that works on most days. Some days are harder. That's what chronic illness looks like, and I've made peace with the fact that it's not a problem to be solved, just a condition to be understood. Dr. Cole and I still talk occasionally. She's incorporating my case, anonymized, into a paper she's writing on dysautonomia recognition in civil legal proceedings. She asked whether I minded. I told her I didn't. If it helps one more woman walk into a courtroom and have someone believe her, then something that cost me everything produced something worth having. Rita came over last Saturday. We sat on the deck until the sun dropped behind the tree line, and she asked me whether I thought things had turned out the way they were supposed to. I thought about that for a while. The people who mattered showed up. Paula, who read every document with the patience of someone who understood what was at stake. Rita, who knew something was wrong before I did and didn't pretend otherwise. Dr. Cole, who sat in a third-row gallery seat with a medical bag because she had learned, through years of watching cases like mine, that being prepared to act was better than being surprised. And the truth, which didn't arrive dramatically or all at once, but which held together the way simple things do, steadily, stubbornly, until there was no more room to argue with it. That was enough. It always is, in the end. The truth doesn't need your help to survive. It only needs enough time and enough people willing to stand up for it. If this story reached you in a moment when your own truth feels like it's losing ground, I hope you'll remember that. And I hope the next person in your life who says they're hurting gets the one thing I wish someone had given me sooner. The simple, steady gift of being believed.